Hello and welcome to the Green Ossining Town Dems Environmental Forum. We're just getting ourselves sorted, but we wanted to give you all watching at home a chance to see our screens that give very short biographies of our 7 candidates. We're going to be ready to start in about 3 minutes, but enjoy the slideshow before then.
I don't know, but if
Only if we have that rule here.
Here's some candidate love. We're live. No, we're recording. In fact, we're recording right now.
I mean, I haven't done it in any public because
Good evening, everyone. How are you today? Good evening, everyone. How are you today? Thank you. Well, my name is Althema Goodson, and I am one of the district leaders for Ossining. And we are here, and welcome to the Ossining Democratic Party with Green Ossining's CD17 District Forum on Green Ossining and clean energy and the environment. Sorry about that, it's been a long day. So I have the distinct honor to introduce our dignitaries. So I will start with our village. We'll go with the village first since we are in the village of Ossining. So I see our trustee, Ms. Dana White. Raise your hand. And I will go to our town officials, our town supervisor, Ms. Liz Feldman. We have our councilwoman, Jen Tawil, in the front, timekeepers. We have our assemblywoman for the 95th District, Dana Levenberg. We have the chair of the Westchester County Democratic Party, Susan Berger here. We have our clerk in the audience, Sue Donnelly. Raise your hand. And we have former Assemblywoman, Miss Sandy Gallup here, as well as former Chairwoman of the Board, Catherine Borger, who is also our co-chair for tonight. So now I will hand it over to these two ladies to get us started.
So much, Althema. Thank you, everyone. As Althema mentioned, I'm the chair of the Ossining Town Democratic Committee, Catherine Borgia. Susie always reminds me to say that I also co-founded Green Ossining many years ago. So many that I So, as you know, we have a very enriched program tonight. We are very grateful to our candidates for agreeing to do something that is very dense, subject matter specific. We did send our candidates the topics that we're hoping to cover tonight. We have a somewhat ambitious list of questions, so we're hoping to really get through them all before we get kicked out of our beautiful library. For those of you who are interested in how people are seated and who's going to go first, we have a little Facebook Live video on, we picked the names out of the hat for who's going to sit where, and then also who's going to be our first person to answer the first question, as well as the person to answer the last question. We're going to ask our candidates to keep it tight to 1 minute. We asked Jen Tawil, Councilwoman Jen Tawil, to be our timekeeper, mostly because she's the toughest person in the Ossining Town Democratic Committee. No joke. So we are going to try to keep it moving because we really want to hear everyone's answer. It's going to be, we're going to ask some questions, and we will have a lightning round, a yes-no lightning round, where we'll distribute yes-no panels. Candidates will answer those questions as well. And then the Westchester Dems site as well. So for anyone who missed it, or any of your friends who couldn't come, please be sure to tell them there's many ways that they can see this. Okay, I think that's it for our preliminary remarks, and I'm going to turn it over to Susie Ross, Chair of Green Ossining, to begin our questioning.
So before we begin, I do need to remind everybody that you are in CD17. And I mentioned that my remarks will follow afterwards, and you'll understand why. The questions that came in were a wide array. And when we what these folks are going to be doing is answering seven questions. You're going to have 1 minute to answer them. Most of you are going to feel potentially dissatisfied with the fact that we didn't cover your area, so we're going to have some yes and no questions as well. But realize that there are so many environmental issues in CD17, and we tried to hit on all of them, so be kind to us. But I do want to mention that the Hudson Valley and CD17 is where the modern environmental movement was born. We've heard from dozens of constituents and organizations from both sides of the river, and we're sharing some of their questions with you this evening. We'd like to acknowledge some of those organizations by thanking Bedford 2030, Croton 100, Food and Water Action, Healthy Yards, Westchester's Pollinator Pathways, Mary Knoll Fathers and Brothers, New Yorkers for Clean Power, the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund, Rockland Water Coalition, Safe Energy Rights Group, Sierra Club Lower Hudson Group, Strawtown Art and Garden Studio, T-Town, Westpac Foundation, and Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions. But I do want to mention that there were a host of other organizations that either submitted questions or refrained from doing so due to fear of retribution or concern for electioneering, which would be in violation of 501c3 status. We are now living at a time when environmental issues appear to be partisan, as if the desire for clean air, water, and a livable future for all are political issues. This greatly concerns environmental advocates. What I will say about environmental advocates in CD17 and across New York State is that we are determined and we are relentless. We understand the risks of inaction and how it affects all sentient beings regardless of party affiliation. If you do not know us now, you eventually will, regardless of the slice of environmental issues we prioritize. And with that, I would like to once again thank our candidates for stepping up and putting themselves out there in a desire to represent us. We are very grateful. Beginning, so I'm not going to go into this any further. Tell us about one experience in your life that made the climate crisis real to you, and what do you see as the 2 to 3 major concerns for CD17 in addressing energy and the environment?
Well, thank you to Ossining, and thank you all for being here. So it's hard to pin it down to one thing, but what I will say is Hurricane Sandy for me was a very eye-opening experience. Living through that hurricane, seeing the impact here in New York, and in particular on the city where we saw power go out into the lower part of Manhattan, that was a massive kind of wake-up call of just how susceptible we are to the changes in the environment. The other one, though, I have to say is in 2018 when my son was born. That's when I realized this future that we're building, this world we leave behind for the next generation. And the 2 or 3 things, I think we can go into these more, but I think that it's really important to talk about the data centers that are popping up all over the district. In particular in Clarkstown, there's one that's particularly concerning at the moment that impacts the waterways as well as the environmental sort of areas. But the other thing I think is also building towards the future and seeing what Ossining is doing here to protect the waterfront is so important because we're going to have to be living with the challenges that we face with the current changes in the environment while we go towards the next.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the Ossining Dems for convening this important conversation on the environment, which is such a critical issue in this election. I'm Beth Davidson. I'm a Rockland County legislator. I'm chair of the Environmental Committee and the Water Task Force in Rockland County. And I'm going to continue on the kid theme here because it was a few years ago when I was talking to my son. He had just finished working on a project with his grandparents for our synagogue. And he was interviewing them, and at the end, they asked him, what do you think your life is going to be like and our world is going to be like when you're our age? And he looked at them deadpan and said, I'm not going to live to be your age. I'm only going to live to 35 because of climate change. My son is a happy-go-lucky kid, but this is how our kids see the climate crisis, that the world is on fire and the adults aren't doing enough about it. Certainly not Mike Lawler, oil and gas lobbyist. That's why I decided to step up, become the environmental chair, the water task force chair, continue advocacy with folks like Tina Bowles and Courtney Williams and Food and Water Watch that I see here in the audience, because we have to protect the planet and people we love. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kate Conley. So I'll tell you, over my lifetime, I've watched how climate change has gone from a community safety issue that I lived through here as a kid in the Hudson Valley to now, as an adult, as a public servant, as a public leader, a national security crisis. And that is how we must address it. But growing up, I was here when we were having debates over whether or not to dredge the Hudson, right? Swimming in it, fishing in it, figuring out how our communities were going to deal with the repercussions of corporations who did not care what happened to the people downstream. I'm now living through a time where we see energy corporations that are doing everything they can to make profits in a dollar, while we, the American people, are dealing with the impacts of climate change on our world, but also on our family bank accounts. And that's where, when you see how climate change is impacting communities today, we see where the effects of extreme weather are causing the loss of American lives, the displacement of American communities, the devastation of American businesses. We can no longer treat this as just a moral or social issue. It's an economic and national security issue.
Hi, I'm MP Phillips-Staley. I'm a trustee in the village of Terrytown and proud liaison with TIAC, our local environmental committee, who I know works with local environmental committees here. Staying with the children's theme, it was really the fear that I saw in my children as they saw me working hard. At the time I was vice president for strategic advancement at the Hispanic Federation, and we were responding to Hurricane Maria. It was, of course, catastrophic in terms of food security, in terms of energy, in terms of so much. But I will say this. What I learned from that experience was how critical, and this applies to CD17, the federal government response is. It must be strong, because that catastrophe happened in part because we allowed it to with our policies around climate change. Transparency at the local level in terms of what people need at the local level for resilience, and I would say real representation in government.
I'm Peter Chatsky. I'll say real quickly, I do not do short well. I do not do one minute well. I apologize in advance. The only thing short I do well is. I grew up in a time where weather was very predictable. I spent my whole life here in Westchester. I can remember with my brother when I was 10 years old, it would snow very regularly. It would snow starting Thanksgiving. It would continue through December, January. We would shovel the driveway together religiously, all the time, very predictably. If you look at just the last 10, 15 years here in Westchester, I have 30 seconds, we have hurricanes, we have unpredictable snow. There are years it doesn't snow at all, other years it's torrential rain. We get microbursts. We have earthquakes. We had 2 earthquakes within a week just about a year or 2 ago. The big issue for 17 is that the national government no longer cares about climate change. The good news is local governments can do a lot to help alleviate all the impacts.
I'm Mike Sachs. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for convening us. This is a great crowd. It's really lovely to see everybody. The problem going sixth is that our answers tend to be told before we get up. And John, your answer about Hurricane Sandy. I was living in Brooklyn Heights in 2012 when Hurricane Sandy came in and flooded the subways, and we could no longer get to work for a good while. That was the first time what we all knew we already existed was made fully real for me. Fast forward a couple of years, and if you've seen us talk before, you'll recognize that I'm laser focused on cutting down every single barrier towards our policies coming to fruition that are directed by the right wing throughout our federal government. As covered in the Supreme Court, Antonin Scalia's final vote was to kill the Clean Power Plan under Obama. So we've had the will for policies before. But there have been people in place, at whatever level it is, that's meant to choke off what we can do to help people, help our country, help our environment, help our children, not live through a hellscape in the future. My job, as I take it, should I get into Congress, is to confront and take down all those structures that we put up to get in the way of our helping people and doing well by the environment.
Thank you all. I'm John Capello, and it's a really pleasure to be here tonight, and thank you all for being here as well. I spent a lot of time looking down at Earth from 30,000 feet, and it's always struck me that there are very few places on this planet that are untouched by humans. And it reminds me of a river in Serbia, South Serbia. When you look from above, it actually looked like a beautiful piece of art. The colors, the flow. But when you got next to it, when I drove next to it, you saw that that beauty was trash. It was garbage, and it made the river unusable. It reminds me a lot of the Hudson, as Kate mentioned. 40 years, General Electric polluted that river. And I couldn't use it as a kid. Couldn't fish there, couldn't swim there. And so the priorities have to be addressing the funding cuts that have taken place for agencies that protect our health and our security. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for really following the rules. We really appreciate it. So our next question, Beth, you'll begin. Biden's Inflation Reduction Act was the greatest climate investment in U.S. history. The Trump administration froze and rolled back the funding for renewable energy solutions relating to this law. What do you believe the benefits of federal investments and incentives are into green energy? 1 minute.
Thank you so much. Well, absolutely, that was a bedrock law that helped us meet clean energy standards. And let's just stop and pause for a minute that Lee Zeldin is the head of the EPA, which is just bananas. What the federal government needs to do is continue, and why we need to take back Congress, is to reinvest in the programs that we know work, to reinstate emission standards on our vehicles, to reinvest in conservation measures. The federal government, as you know, also expanded the monuments that contain so much of our open public land, which Donald Trump is already back trying to trim back. We know that old growth forests are carbon sinks and stop the emissions that accelerate the climate crisis. Those are two major ways that the federal government can reinvest and that Congress can start right away to start reinvesting in, along with the clean energy tax credits that not only will help us meet our clean energy goals here in New York and around the country, but we know will create tens of thousands of jobs, particularly as AI is growing more important. Thank you.
Okay, so it comes down to tax credits and grants. What we saw with both the Inflation Reduction Act as well as the infrastructure bill were literally hundreds of billions of dollars in investment into alternative energy. Which honestly, I think we need to stop calling alternative energy, because at this point, it is just investment in energy. It is more responsible, it's cleaner, it's more efficient energy. But what we are facing as an American economy, as a global economy, is a growing energy demand that we must meet with greater supply. And that means green energy supply to offset the detrimental impacts that we've seen from fossil fuels. And so with that, yes, the federal government needed to continue what it was already doing, which was helping grow domestic green energy businesses with solar panel production, with geothermal investments and pilot projects, with things like wind turbine investment. All things that the federal government has a responsibility to help our communities do and pursue. And that's where you see grant programs like FEMA's BRIC, the Building Resilience and Infrastructure in Communities, focused on helping communities make these major investments to offset the detrimental impacts of climate change, to prevent hazards before they happen.
Thank you. So, echoing my peers here, at the local level, we cannot do the work that we have to do for climate resilience without the support of the federal government, very simply because our local taxes can't carry the burden. So, the Biden's Infrastructure Act is a godsend to us in Tarrytown in terms of climate resilience. But not just that, also the EPA, their ability to enforce laws, their ability to provide the solid research, and their ability to provide the technical assistance was essential. We can only become climate resilient in New York 17 if we reinstate the EPA to where it was, and if we get these tax credits, as my peer said, we have to have them. There is no reason the government should be investing tax funds in oil and fossil fuels. It should all be going to green energy because that is the technology of the future. We need it.
It's an amazing step backwards, obviously. The return to fossil fuels, the decimating of tens of millions of dollars in alternate cleaner green energy, $7 billion in solar alone, completely gone. No one has mentioned one other avenue here, in addition to loss of all the investment tax credits that were propelling an industry. The Trump administration got rid of a lot of the compliance to make sure that we were upholding standards that had existed. So not only did he lower standards for better use of equipment at home, products, better, more efficient technologies, he got rid of any of the compliance, so really there are no more standards because nobody's checking them. This is a complete reversal of where we need to be.
And why? Why? Other than what? Billionaire bought administrations, legislators, Mr. Lawler. Why? Just a reactionary sense of what, masculinity or something? I don't know why, but it makes no sense. I have a confession, I have a Tesla. I wouldn't have gotten it. I got it before the election. And I got a 3-year lease, and I wouldn't have done so if it weren't for the tax credits, both state and federal. It was affordable. And that's what motivates people to actually move forward towards doing what's right for themselves, for their families, for this world, for the environment. And geothermal. Again, we've done it but for the tax credits. They are gone because this administration wants to have some revanchist idea of what it once was in this country when we could loot with impunity and have the rich get richer. You can get a whole new class of people who are getting a lot of money and have that wealth go build the middle class, while the rest of us are spending less money and making the world better for ourselves and our children. It's insane, and who does it serve? But those who are buying the power right now.
Thank you. I've spent 26 years working on difficult challenges, but in the military. But we've always developed strategic plans, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. And the lack of any strategic planning in this situation has put us in the position we're in now. And we're really far behind. Clean power and renewables are in ascendancy. We look at 2023, 2024, we see that clean power, electric vehicles, increasing, always increasing. But we've got some headwinds. There are some headwinds that are being exacerbated by this administration. And we have to make sure that that we continue to push for a national strategic plan that allows us to capitalize on our capabilities to produce these types of technologies.
Thank you.
So,
I'm so sorry.
So the federal government plays a key role when it comes to regulating both the environment and the impacts that we can have on the environment. But I think it's really important to think about what's happening right now today. Today, Kathy Hochul and Representative Tonko were actually having a press conference about calling on the Trump administration to release $400 million in federal funding to help with energy costs, primarily because it will affect and benefit 1.5 million families here in New York. The idea is that the federal government plays a key role when it comes to giving our communities the power it needs to actually do the important work. Mike Lawler cut $50 million of clean energy renewable grants and different funding, specifically in the Big Ugly Bill. So that's why it's so important that one of us is sitting in Mike Lawler's seat when it comes around in January 2027. We can propose all the policies, and I agree with everything my colleague said, but we actually need to bring home the bacon when it comes to New York 17, allow our legislators and our local leaders be able to identify where to best use those funds to benefit their communities.
Thank you. Sorry about that, John. Somehow I feel like I owe you, but... Okay, we're only on question number 3, but you guys are doing great. This question, Kate, you're going to start off with this. I do want to remind everybody, I don't know if everyone can hear us in the back and on Facebook Live. So just make sure that you keep that mic really close, like weirdly close to your mouth. Okay. According to Gallup polling from July 2025, 91% of Democrats and 61% of independents think the federal government is doing too little to protect the environment. Yet environmental issues are rarely talked about as key campaign issues. Thanks to the recent election victories, it's a little easier to imagine a world when Democrats have power in Washington. Do you believe that America should be a world leader in tackling the climate crisis? If so, what are the top 2 to 3 legislative actions Congress should take first to reverse the current path of the climate crisis? You have 1 minute.
So I think we need to recognize that today, for my generation, climate change isn't just a scientific or moral discussion or debate. It is driving and interwoven with an affordability crisis. We talked about earlier, look, you have families that are debating how they're possibly going to put food on the table, keep a roof over their family's head, keep the lights on, afford health care, and give their kids better futures. This is the crisis we are facing, and climate change is interwoven into all of them. When we look at how do we keep our families healthy and safe and secure, this is where the environment drives so much of that, right? And is interlinked with both healthcare and economic opportunity. We have to get the federal government back to where we're investing in the programs we already talked about, where we're spurring investment in energy development, that is clean energy. But we also must be looking at how do we create educational opportunities so that future workforce can invest and be part of these solutions too. This goes back to here in Hudson Valley. Why don't we create programs at BOCES where we don't just have HVAC technicians, we have solar panel repair technicians, right? How do we interlink those two things?
Enforcer is very, very good. To be a world-class leader in this field, I would say the first thing we do is we have to reverse the tariffs, because the tariffs are preventing this industry from getting the supplies they need to actually execute the work. We can have all the legislation in place, but without access to materials, it's not going to happen. The other, I would say that the amount of tax credits that go to fossil fuel industries need to be stopped. We are putting far too much emphasis on fossil fuels still, and we are not putting enough emphasis on renewable energies. We are a nation of innovation. We always have been, but with the kinds of reversals that we've seen from this government, getting rid of scientists, getting rid of young scientists entering the EPA, we're cutting our ability to really be a world leader as we should be. So we absolutely have to bring back the scientists to this process to aid local governments.
It's pretty simple what the first 2 steps have to be. We have to get back to a government that cares about the health, safety, welfare of its constituents. There are even economic reasons to reverse the path we're on now. First 2 things, let's believe in science once again. The IPCC summarizes, it's a UN committee, summarizes hundreds if not thousands of research articles on climate change and the environment. We need to take those seriously, look at their recommendations seriously. We need to rejoin the Paris Accord. We need to get back on a database system of government. The facts are out there. We have to stop denying what's coming in the future and put in policies in place that embrace what all the science is telling us we need to take action on.
The House will probably be the one chamber, one branch of the federal government that Democrats can control from January 3rd, 2027. So you asked about legislative vision. I haven't heard anyone mention, and that's a tough thing to do when we're in this, I know many of you probably had it on your mind, the Green New Deal. Ida Lowy was a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. Somehow, the Green New Deal became a bad word with, I don't know, Trump's reemergence. But we need to remember that when Trump's in power, and Republicans are with him and enabling him, people don't like them. They're unpopular. And it opens up new vistas for legislation that were once thought perhaps aspirational or even off the table. So with the danger and the damage that Trump is doing to each other, to us, to our environment, is robbing us blind and picking our pockets to line those of his friends and family, we can walk through that rubble and build something new that helps everybody. The Green New Deal was and remains that.
Thank you. To answer the question simply, should the U.S. be a leader? Of course we should be. And you mentioned the Paris Accords, but how about the COP30 in Brazil? Who's there? representing the United States. What kind of a role are we playing on the world stage with respect to this? We know what we need to do, and we're not doing it. And it's very clear because this administration has made it difficult for companies to do the types of research, the types of development.
Not so talked about over the last 30 years as this new thing that's unreachable by so many people and so expensive. But you talk about bringing those subsidies in and benefiting small businesses that are currently existing, weaving it into the economy that we already have. And that's how you get Donald Trump to sign off, because you're talking about money for small businesses, but you're also building out the climate and the remediation efforts that are so necessary when it comes to building out a clean energy and infrastructure. I think so the subsidies and things along the lines that everyone's been talking about are really important, but we're going to have to do everything possible to convey to Donald Trump that this is a good idea, and that's by using business.
Thank you. Well, the environment has always been an important issue in every campaign that I've run, particularly my county legislative campaign, where one of the campaign promises I made was to finally create a climate action plan for Rockland County. We still don't have one, inspired by my own home village of Nyack, which had a 2030 climate action plan well ahead of its time. And so I'm proud to have passed the funding to create a Climate Smart Communities Task Force that's already getting to work, but it's going to be hard for them to do their work without those tax incentives for wind, for solar, for home-based geothermal. Another issue that I really think we need to tackle is mass transit. There is a dearth of mass transit in Rockland County, where I live. And let's talk about the fact, we're talking about all the projects and money that's been cut. The Gateway Project that Donald Trump cut just to punish New York, which would finally ensure a one-seat ride from Rockland County into the city and take thousands of cars off the road every day. That's something we need to put back into play, and what I will try to do as the next member of Congress.
Thank you so much, and really good job sticking to the 1 minute. Very impressed. This is a little bit of part two of that question. Some of you already mentioned some of the topics. So, recent off-year election to look at who's wins for candidates ranging from Democratic Socialists to center-left moderates. And it's been years since progressives like AFC and others really mobilized voters by prioritizing initiatives like the Green New Deal to address issues of environmental justice and economic opportunity. So even if Dems take back control of Congress, Trump will still be in the White House, as you've all mentioned. So I guess part two of the question that you just answered is, what are some of the other initiatives where you believe you can actually make either legislative or programmatic progress, and be as specific as you possibly can in your 1 minute? Thank you. Effie, I think you're first.
Thank you, and thank you for asking that question. There are many environmental justice zones within New York 17th district, and these are zones that frankly should get the priority in terms of planning and resources for climate resilience, because you can see the health impacts specifically in this community. I believe Ossining is one, Terrytown is another, Peekskill is another. So an emphasis on that, because frankly it is undoing decades and decades of injustice. And the way to do it right is by listening first. Not coming in with prescriptive plans and telling people what they need, but engaging communities in specifically what will transform their lives and their living situations, putting that into policy, and then delivering. The failure to do this by the Democratic Party for far too long is the reason we keep losing. It's the reason we keep having low propensity voters, and I intend to reverse that in this race.
I think one of the things you're seeing as in the last election cycle is that so many of the problems we're having globally can be addressed locally, and even in an environment where you have a federal government that is just failing us in every way. Things like protecting our waters, curbing PFAS, making sure our sewer systems, whether they're stormwater or sewer, are functioning properly, improving local wetlands, building standards, going for greener buildings, preserving trees and carbon sequestration. All of that can be done on a local level, and it can be enforced locally. I think the best thing the government can do, even when the top of the government is so against this, is disseminate best practices that local communities embrace and know how to take care of some of these problems locally, because we're seeing major strides as long as communities understand what they have to do.
We have to fight. When we have that one chamber of the one branch of the federal government, and Trump, John, I love you, but I don't think Trump's not signed up for anything pro-business. I don't think he cares. I think he wants to hurt. He's got his people, he wants to hurt. We're going to get the subsidies back, as long as he's in office. So what can we do? We can propose big swings that give people hope, that show that we're in it for everybody, not just one group or another, special interest, but everyone, right, left, and center, from Rockland to Putnam to Dutchess to here in Westchester. We also need to show who the bad guys are, so we can use our oversight capacity to have hearings that make a show, an entertaining show, for all the people who profited off our planet's pain. We can bring them in, oil executives, gas executives, members of the administration, and ask them questions, make them squirm, and show the public these are the people who are robbing you blind and make themselves richer while they hurt our planet and our kids' future. We can do that. It'd be kind of fun.
Thank you. Peter mentioned the importance of local solutions, and most of you in here are here because you're working on local solutions and focused on them. But those local solutions have to be backed by national policy. It has to be. We're entering an age, whether it's with AI or renewables and clean technologies, where our economy's shifting and changing. The young people in this room that are home now, getting ready to go to school tomorrow, they're going to be affected by all of this. And so a strong national policy is essential. And I look at, and that means training, right? Training and education. Governor Hochul brought a $40 million project to Troy, workforce training. And I think that's an example of the type of thing we could do where we have the combination of national, local cooperation, and we need to bring that to our district here, that type of training and education.
So it is local solutions. It is New York. This is where the modern environmental movement was birthed. This is where we have to show to the rest of the country how you can do this and be effective in one of the largest states and one of the largest cities by revenue. We have to do everything possible to get Governor Hochul to sign off on things like the 100-foot ban and making sure that we have the ability to get the HEAT Act passed and the recycling and packaging that Senator Harkin introduced. Those are ways to show that it benefits the community. And then you need to go to Washington. You need to talk about those things on the platform that this member of Congress will have, which is to talk about the importance of New York leading the way. That's how we bring investment into our economy. That's how we bring investment into CD17. And we build out new different types of work training, if you will, whether it be battery storage capacity, which is something that we're seeding right now to the northern part of the state. And we bring that here while talking about it all the time in Washington and holding those accountable. But we have to be honest that the government right now is not poised to put in place some sort of brand new sweeping legislative policy, and that's why New York's going to have to lead the way.
I appreciate that we all try to remember a time when the environment was not a partisan issue. And I would argue that environmental justice or injustice is one of the reasons our country keeps becoming more and more divided. We know that where environmental outcomes are low because of pollution, because of factories, because of standards being rolled back, is also where marginalized communities live. And that is leading to greater health disparities, economic disparities that again drive us further apart. I'm proud that as chair of the Environmental Committee, I am working on solutions to this locally. And that is about making sure that underserved communities aren't targeted. Project Maple, a dirty pipeline that I was proud to lead a resolution opposing, the first county resolution in the state, would have put a dirty air compressor right in the middle of Ramapo, where our most disadvantaged communities already live. Locally and nationally, we have to stop the divide that environmental injustice is driving this country.
So I spent the last 4 years working with members of Congress, with committees. I've written federal legislation overseeing Mexican national budgets. So while yes, hopefully we are in control of the House next year, no matter what position we are in, there are absolutely ways in which we can drive accountability for those who continue to fail our communities in this way, and where we can continue to push initiatives where pathways remain open. What do I mean by that? Look, we just saw how all of our energy providers in New York 17 are seeking double-digit rate increases at a time where families are facing an energy crisis and an affordability crisis. Hauling those CEOs in front of Congress and having them testify before committees on how they are failing to invest adequately in their communities while they're still raking home double-digit millions of dollars in CEO incentives every year is a failure in leadership they must be held accountable for. The other part of this is there are programs we can continue to invest in, pursuing this as a national security initiative and imperative. And this goes back to, while we did divest of certain investments in things like solar and wind, there are still other programs and investments and rebates available in geothermal we should be doubling down on. And that goes very quickly.
Okay, our next question number 5. The EPA's role is to set federal standards to protect Americans. The Clean Air Act, as an example, is a comprehensive U.S. federal law that regulates air emissions to protect public health and the environment by setting national air quality standards. The current administration has undermined and is in the process of dismantling the EPA's efficacy. If elected to Congress, what efforts would you make to restore the EPA's role in enforcing and establishing standards to protect Americans?
I'm not sure where to begin on this question because we've moved so far away from data. I alluded to this earlier. We have to get back to an administration that understands there's actual data, there's actual proof that if you don't enforce laws in place, there are going to be horrific consequences for the health of Americans. It's not something that we have the luxury of stalling for a year or 2 years and then implementing policy later. These are things that have been identified, we're already behind the curve. I would also make the point, EPA developed by Richard Nixon. Who would have thought? Let's bring Nixon back. We're just living in a crazy time where this administration is not recognizing the very things we all recognize. And again, we just have to get back to making the case to the party of fiscal responsibility. It's not fiscally responsible to delay these things, and then it's going to cost a lot more to put solutions in place.
And the party isn't going to do that because it's a zombified version of Nixon, Reagan, and Bush. They're pretty much the id of those administrations, shorn of any ideological or intellectual consistency, only just to hurt people. I keep saying that, I know, I sound like a broken record, but they're in control of the Supreme Court too. It's a broken record. But the point of my saying that is that the Supreme Court has cut down the Clean Power Plan, they've cut down the Good Neighbor Rule, and they lie in wait to cut down anything that should we get a Democrat in the White House in 2029, but maybe we don't have the Senate, they will cut down anything that comes out of that White House too. So what we need to do is start flexing our legislative muscle again and recognizing what we can do as the people who control the House. And say, this is what we are going to do for you. We are going to codify the Clean Power Plan. We're going to codify the Good Neighbor Rule. We're going to make sure that anything we do by law is an act of Congress, that it cannot be cut down by a court that says a president cannot do that. If they want to
feel the pressure because elected officials have a lot of power. It's just who are they going to listen to? We have to be louder and angrier and more demanding than corporate money. That is what we need to do. That was very brief.
Effie took my closing remarks and I hate her. I think one of the things we need to do is recognize that Trump is not only savage and cruel, he's also incredibly competitive. So we need to point out, for example, that China is now getting 40% of its electric from renewables. The United States is nowhere close to that. Sweden, Denmark, Norway, 60 to 85% of their power renewables. We are losing. And they are saying far cheaper cost to produce these things because they're popular. It's economies of scale. They're using hydroelectric, they're using solar. If we want to use solar now, we have to import parts from China because it's so much cheaper over there because they're doing so well. Over the last decade, prices for solar and wind have dropped 70 to 90% in 10 years. We need to get on their terms and say, it's all about money, making the proper investments and turning this around is going to save us a lot of money in the long run. One last thing on utilities, we need to move to performance-based increases on their rates. They do significant investments, then they get rate increases. That'll move us into the next section.
Okay, thank you. You guys made it to the last question. This is our last open-ended question. There'll be 7, as we talked about, lightning round after this. John Cabela, you're gonna begin. The Hudson River has been part of so much that we love about the Hudson Valley to environmental advocates and general community members alike, but it has also been severely attacked by industrial and commercial abuse for decades. While progress has been made, there are still threats, risks, and dangers to this vital water body. What do you consider to be the top threats to the recovery of the Hudson River, and how would you use your voice in Congress to support its continued health?
Thank you. And that's a great question. As I alluded to in my opening remarks, I mean, the Hudson has been under threat for decades. GE, again, dumping all those chemicals, but it is our lifeline. It affects so much of our community, the weather, how we travel, and we have to keep it healthy. And it will always be a priority to me. Look, I think there's 2 recent things that have occurred. The algae blooms this last year, right? Those are a result of what has been happening, and the way we need to address that is make sure that agencies that are developed to provide for public safety and our health are fully funded. Those blooms have significant impact on our communities and potentially even greater impact, the greatest in 40 years. And then additionally, we have to really fight hard against the dumping of from Indian Point, the dumping of the water back into the Hudson. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so I'll pick up where John left off. The number one thing that I think is a threat to the Hudson right now is Holtec and their willingness and desire to use the river for their own personal benefit, to violate the rules that we have put in place here in New York, to have the federal government then overrule New York and say radioactive wastewater can go back into our river because somebody on the other side of the country has decided it's a good idea. The idea that we have Indian Point is right there on the river, and then now we're going to send more pollutants and radioactive waste into that river is just despicable to me, and it's something that the federal government has had overreach and allowing to have happen, and now we need to be fighting back against Holtec and everything that's happening at Indian Point to make sure it doesn't make it any more less safe generally for us, particularly because it's such a huge impact on our water, and then obviously the algae blooms are a huge concern, and it's just because of the overpollution of the water.
So, like a few other things I've talked about tonight, you don't have to ask me what I will do in Congress. I can tell you as chair of the Environmental Committee what I'm doing right now to protect our Hudson River. So the second the Holtec decision was handed down by the federal court, I quickly called a press conference, I rallied activists, I rallied local elected officials, and we went down and stood at the Haverstraw Bay that depends on the Hudson for recreation, for tourism, for hardworking families in Haverstraw, and of course for our health and our safety. And we called on the governor and the attorney general to appeal that decision. I'm so grateful that within a week, I had answers back from both women that they stood with us on stopping Holtec from dumping that water, and that Governor Hochul has no intention of restarting nuclear at Indian Point. Now we look at Project Maple possibly coming, a fracked gas pipeline coming underneath the Hudson River. I'm doing everything I can to stop that, as I've mentioned, working with Food and Water Watch to pass the first countywide resolution opposing that project, and also stopping harmful algal blooms by regulating fertilizers that cause them. Thank you.
So I know I sound a bit like a broken record, but this really does come down to corporate accountability and responsibility. I read an op-ed, I think it was in Lowhood a few weeks ago, about the failure to hold energy companies accountable, utility companies accountable. John was just talking about it with Holtec, right? And the failure for them to prioritize the safety of our communities, threatening to dump the radioactive waste into our Hudson River after everything it's already been through. It is the role of government to make sure these things do not happen. You shouldn't be thanking government because they're doing these things. It is literally their job to do it. and we are failing to do it adequately enough, and that's why we're dealing with these issues. Like, it goes beyond that. Look at shipping. You had a company that had agreed to install this pipeline, this line, a certain number of feet underneath the seabed in order to protect the maritime environment, shipping. And instead, they failed to follow through what they had agreed upon, and now it's several feet above the threshold, and you're talking about, even the Coast Guard is saying it's a threat to maritime operations on the Hudson River. There is a failure to hold corporations accountable that needs to end, and that is the role of government to do so.
And building off that, we need a very strong person in Congress who will hold corporations accountable. And the way to do it is by amplifying the voices of local people who have to live with these decisions. No congressperson, I mean, I don't really know, I'll be honest, how this happened, that a nuclear plant was built adjacent to a pipeline on top of 2 seismic faults. And yet that happened. And you can hear locals screaming into the wind, seemingly powerless. You wonder why people don't think they should vote. We need a person in Congress who sees the logic, who honors the voices of the people who are directly affected and fights for them. Not somebody who goes to the federal government and says, oops, I have to wait for Schumer to say it's okay. Not at all. It takes a person who sees the logic, who puts people first, and who fights for New York 17.
It's not just the Hudson. Our waterways are probably our most important defense against global warming, and the ecosystems they help maintain and have the balance of natural carbon sequestration. It's just something we have to protect at all costs. I spent over a year of my life researching and writing Broadfoot Matters wetlands law. It's one of the most protective in the state, if not in the country. It's as important we protect not only the wetlands, but the buffer areas. The other crucial thing is we all have to do, all communities have to do a much better job with their storm water management, because what's happening is rainwater, stormwater is hitting the streets. It is overburdening our systems. It's carrying all these PFAS that, whether they're in to-go containers or road salts, it's corroding our systems. Those end up in our natural waterways, and it pollutes the whole thing. So stormwater management, which by the way is a local issue and can be enforced locally, and just respecting things like building trees in communities and other natural, not just water, natural carbon sinks. Done.
Yes, and to everything. There's also the Clean Water Act. We talked about the Clean Air Act, but there's the Clean Water Act, which has been getting constricted and decimated over not just since Trump, but probably over the last 15, 20 years in the courts and through Republican administrations. We can start building that back up as well. We can focus on legislation that codifies what has been struck down. We can focus on bringing back the Waters of the United States rule that protects our wetlands. Thank you. And we can focus that not only on the Hudson, but as Peter said, on all the waterways and wetlands in this country. The job of the federal government is to make sure that our public areas are clean and safe and healthy and aren't captured by the corporate interests, as kids talking about, that talk about a big game about federalism and executive and national overreach, but they really just want to have the ability to pump our waters full of pollution. It doesn't have to be that way. We have the laws on the books to do so, and we can regulate accordingly, but we have to create those vistas with our control of Congress.
Very good. EPA has announced plans to largely roll back hard-won progress to set health standards for a limited number of toxic PFAS chemicals in the nation's drinking water. I've mentioned this a few times. These forever chemicals contaminate the drinking water of thousands of communities across the country, including Rockland County and areas of Westchester and Putnam counties, as well as contaminating thousands of consumer products. If you were our representative, would you support legislation that would ban PFAS chemicals in non-essential uses? Can I guess everybody? Is that a uniform? Yes. Okay, very good. Thank you.
While New York State has banned fracking, we continue to allow fracked gas pipelines to be constructed in our state, including the Nessie pipeline that Governor Hochul approved 2 weeks ago over the objections of a delegation of more than a dozen New York congressional representatives. The delegation cited concerns that the pipeline will increase energy costs for New York ratepayers and poses serious environmental, public, health, and safety risks. In the words of Congressman Nadler, this decision regrettably disregards the science, the voices of New Yorkers, and the goals set out in our own climate law. By approving this pipeline, the state risks locking our communities into decades of unnecessary fossil fuel dependence and undoing much of the progress we've made toward a cleaner, safer future. If you were our representative, would you fight for policies that advocates believe would disincentivize investment in more fracked gas pipelines? Doubting.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. You guys are doing great. So question number 3, the federal government subsidizes the fossil fuel energy with billions of dollars every year in government handouts. These efforts are designed to limit our energy source options and continue to prop up the fossil fuel industry. If you are a representative, would you champion legislation to eliminate subsidies to the fossil fuel industry and redirect those taxpayer dollars to investments in renewable energy?
These are not really questions.
Looks like, once again, all yes.
All right, this is a 2-part question, so you're gonna have to use those twice. There are 54 nuclear facilities currently operating in the United States, including 3 in upstate New York. While nuclear energy is a lightning rod for environmental advocates in CD17 that live in the shadows of Indian Point, nuclear energy is still perceived by some to be part of the solution. As I mentioned, this is a 2-part question, so you're going to answer this first one and then I'll ask the second. Do you support reinvestments in traditional nuclear facilities to be part of the solution during our energy transition?
What do you mean by traditional? Like
So,
1950s Indian Point? Or like
the current nuclear technology.
But that's different, so current modern technology.
Yes. So, and it also means supporting current nuclear that may need to be left alone, may need a life for another 30 years, so we need to reinvest in that. So again, the question is, do you support reinvestment in traditional nuclear facilities to be part of the solution during our energy transition?
That's right.
That's right.
So we have, okay. Okay. Bethan, did everyone understand that question, or shall I make it? Okay. So there are 3 nuclear power plants in New York State that have long lived past perhaps when they should have lived, and they should be perhaps taken offline. And there is a move to reinvest in them to keep them going. Reinvestment in traditional nuclear facilities. Okay? The second question is, do you support federal investment in theoretical nuclear technology?
What is that?
Not near the Hudson.
As in small modular nuclear reactors? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, question 5. Here's hoping we don't have any confusion about this one. Across New York, massive data centers, including forms of cryptocurrency mining, are driving up household energy bills, straining local water supplies, and making it harder for our state to meet its clean energy goals. They've been used to justify the construction of new pipelines and new nuclear power plants. Tech companies are pushing to expand these facilities before we can even understand their full impact on our communities and infrastructure. Will you support stopping new data center construction until strong standards are in place to protect residents, our water, and New York's clean energy goals? It definitely was easier.
These aren't questions.
Okay, question number 6. As we speak, COP30, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, has convened. As a pivotal meeting for global cooperation and emission reduction commitments, it has delivered progress through the Paris Climate Agreement, albeit not as fast or as equitable as needed. The current administration has withdrawn all previous UN emission reduction commitments and has refrained from sending a delegate to represent the United States. This again is a two-part question. Do you believe that the United States should be a leader in global emission reductions? Second question, do you believe the United States should re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement?
Okay, final lightning round question. Given that we've already lost more than half of our insects and nearly 1/3 of our birds, and that invasive plants now make up over 50% of the woodland understory in lower New York State, and I think it might even be higher in Westchester County, do you acknowledge that urgent action is needed to address the rapid deterioration of our woodlands caused by climate change, invasive species, and overbrowsing by deer? Right.
Thank you, that was the lightning round. Around and end with that. They have 2.5 minutes, but there's a question as part of this, and I do want to remind candidates that in this final question, you can do any rebuttal, any follow-up, expand on any concerns raised, clarify anything you may have said, or any ideas you got from your neighbors. And you can use that time to, in that 2.5 minutes, to respond to that as well as this last question. As our representative in Congress, what do you believe your role can be in helping to address climate resilience in CD17?
So for my first 40 years, I've sat here and watched as we have failed as a country, as a globe, to adequately and fairly address the climate crisis. And now it's become not just, again, a scientific or moral discussion. It has literally led to the loss of American lives, the devastation of communities, the devastation of American businesses. Climate change is now a national security crisis. I've spent my life tackling national security crises. This is the next generation of that type of fight, and it's one that will define my generation. We must do better than we have to date, and we have to recognize the opportunity that is also there. And that's where we talk about, look, just as we're facing a climate crisis, we're also facing an affordability crisis. And addressing those in the same plane is going to be essential to driving real change forward, to making the lives of Americans all across this country and right here in CD17 better. And there's opportunity in this. Look, we're going to have to address the impacts of AI. Everything from, yes, the growing demand of energy to the decreasing availability of some white-collar jobs. We've got to create opportunities in the economy. And that is where doing things like investing in these more efficient forms of energy provides so much of that opportunity if we do it right. And that is why it's important for you to have a member of Congress who not only understands the implications, but how to deliver results and get things done. And this is where we need to be driving initiatives where we are restoring investment in solar and wind energies, in addition to geothermal and all other forms to meet the demands and drive down the price of energy as families are making trade-offs between prescriptions and groceries and not being able to keep on the electric, in the winter and keep their families warm. We've got to address these problems because they are facing American families every day, or American families are facing them every day, and government is failing them. So as we look forward to what these opportunities mean, we should be investing in manufacturing elements of our critical infrastructure here in the U.S. We should be looking at opportunities to grow workforce employment that are tied to green energy jobs, like we were talking about with BOCES. Why can't we expand the electrical trades, which are going to be so essential? Include programming like solar panel repair technicians and wind turbine repair technicians. All of these things, if we address it the right way, creates opportunity for a better future for America. And we have to stop failing.
When my son was very young, we lived in a part of Manhattan that was shaped by Robert Moses. It was a triangle of the West Side Highway, Broadway, and the Cross Bronx.
It didn't take long for him to develop asthma. It didn't take long for my asthma, which had been latent, to go completely out of control. That is a landscape that was defined in many ways by one person who imposed it on people. And I feel right now our nation is in a situations where corporations and their profits impose essential structures on us to our immense detriment financially, in terms of our health, in terms of the longevity of our society facing climate change. We cannot allow this anymore. We have to take corporate money out of government. The minute corporations were treated as people, it tipped the scales so radically that it's going to take an immense fight to tip the scales back and to center people in government. Mike Lawler is not a public servant. He is not doing the job for people, he is doing it for his own power. And we need people in government, we need a member of Congress who centers the people first. That means listening to what the problems are, partnering to develop solutions and goals, developing policy to advance those, and then fighting for it. So that is what I propose to do, because I come from a lifelong activist and social justice background. It started when I was young. I determined that this was the kind of work that I would do for the rest of my life. It's what brought me to public office, and it's what brings me in front of you here today. An absolute promise to reverse this hideous trend of government centering its own power for oligarchs to benefit, and reversing that and returning it back to the people. Because I will say this, Mike Lawler serves at our discretion. We can fire him, and we should.
I'd like to start by first thanking all of you for coming out tonight. It's a critical issue. I want to thank you not just for coming, but for your dedication and devotion to such an important topic. I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. One is that, yes, the federal government right now is failing at all these things related to climate change. But when Trump left the Paris Accord, what you saw is dozens of governors and mayors and representatives of the vast majority of the population of the US stepping up to do the job. Do not give up, start locally. Between mandating better wetlands protections and tree canopy protections and pollinator pathways and everything you can do to encourage the preservation of all these natural carbon sinks, that's what you want to do locally. Federal government will catch up, which relates to the second thing. None of this is going to be possible unless we flip Congress as a start and unless we make major changes to the representational nature of our federal government. Every stall this, but we need to get money out of our system. It's corrupting everything. It's corrupting everything from campaigns to actually governing. That would be an amazing first step toward restoring the preservation of our environment, stopping all the social injustice that comes with this. It would increase affordability, it would provide jobs, opportunities for America. It's the America we want to get back to, and it would make Democrats so proud to be Democrats again if we could take control of this and make the world a much better place, make our America a much better place. So thank you for your attention so far. Keep paying attention all year. Keep exploring these issues that you care most about, and let's make all this work for us together.
To be fair, they told them not to clap when you're not talking.
We'll have time for everyone at the end.
No, I wouldn't clap for you too. So we are now in a moment in which we are at the precipice of perhaps another reconstruction in this country. And climate is core to that.
We had the Civil War. We had the Great Depression. And now I think we're at a point where our democracy is at its greatest risk that we've ever faced, which creates opportunity for us to rebuild and reconstruct a country that serves the people and helps those who need help and puts us all together on a better path forward. Does that sound platitudinous? Sure. But is that why we're all here? It is. To get our planet, not least also our river, our towns, our river towns, in a place where they thrive, we also need to have our democracy in a place where it is truly representative, where each person in this room can exercise his or her fundamental freedoms, where we don't have corporate capture of our government, and where anyone who wants to be a citizen of this country and share in its bounty after they contribute to it can. That is where we can be, if we can so will it. Now, how do we recover that power of the purse in the House? We've been given some ideas recently. In previous government shutdowns, when Republicans tried to shut down the government, they wanted to do so to hurt people. They wanted to kill Obamacare, so they got shut down the government. What we just saw was a confrontation over hope. People who wanted to help rather than hurt, saying, we are not going to fund this regime unless they promise to help. Now, of course, there was a fold there, but there will be another fight coming up in just a couple months. And that is an idea for us on how we can use power. It's not just policy, but power when we have it, to maximize our possibility of making those new vistas real. People will come along. We talk about losing elections. We lose elections because we stop fighting once we're blocked by the billionaire-backed system designed to do so. So show the people that we're fighting. My background's in media and courts and law. That is the exact terrain that this moment is being fought on. And if I'm in Congress, I will fight on all those terrains to make sure we can get to that reconstructed country and move forward for all of us together.
We really are going to do a huge round of applause for everyone. Don't worry.
So I started in my introduction talking about how I saw the impact on the earth. It's unmistakable and it's irrefutable. And there's clearly a tension between human progress and our impact on the planet. I was stationed at Ellsworth Air Force Base in Rapid City, South Dakota for over 3 years. I had the opportunity and the honor to work with a lot of Native Americans in the area. And the Lakota look at decision making in that the decisions you make today should consider the well-being of future generations. Right? It's tied to the philosophy of 7 generations. So the decision we make today should impact positively 7 generations into the future. And we have the opportunity, we have the ability to do that, right? Technology, clean technologies can allow us to prosper, to be secure, and to minimize our impact on the planet. And it's not just an economic imperative, a national security imperative, but it's our responsibility to do so. I talked a little bit about national security as well. We have to start acting like this is a national security issue, that this is in fact important enough for us to play a leadership role in the world. We used to think that we were secure because we were between 2 oceans and that our adversaries couldn't reach us. Well, now we're in a position where those 2 oceans are actually potentially detrimental to our future. And it's because of the actions that humans have taken. And we have to change that. You asked about climate resilience. It's hard for me to think of a definition other than absorbing the impact, society absorbing the impact without breaking. And I would ask all of you today, do you think we're prepared for that? My answer is no, we're not prepared. And the policies of this administration are not making us any better prepared, and we will do something about that. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Right at the end, the whole falls apart.
Well, thank you again for having all of us tonight and for your willingness to sit through us droning on about a lot of different things. I will say that the point of having this forum tonight, I think, is because right now the world is so chaotic. My news feed is ready to quit and go on strike. There is nothing but nonstop craziness coming our way. So the idea that we can come into a room and have this many people come out and we can sit down and ground ourselves and talk about the future for the next generation is so important. And it's really important too because as we've talked about it, we frame it in so many different ways, from national security. When I was at the FBI for 17 years as a leader there, one of the teams that I had was the Environmental Crimes Unit. And it's not just this theoretical national security threat, but it's actually the pillaging of the environment, primarily in Central and South America, is used to fund drug trafficking organizations that bring drugs into our country. That is real, and it impacts our air and our water and our safety and our health as it relates to opioids and other challenges. But this election is going to be key because we have the opportunity to increase turnout. And when I say that, I mean 30% of the electorate here in New York 17 are millennials or Gen Zers. If we're not talking about environment in our campaigns, we're losing. It may be this third rail issue when it comes to some folks, but it inspires 30% of the population who may have never voted before or aren't interested and feel like politics is ruined for all the corporation and money and dirty money in politics that my colleagues have talked about. So when it comes down to it, it's continuing the work that I did in the FBI to protect the environment, but it also means listening and learning. Many of these issues don't come up in the average person's day-to-day life and when they're thinking about potentially running for Congress or running for office, but this campaign has been about learning and listening. And maybe we may not always end up at the same position or the same solution, but it's having that conversation which is missing in Washington and surely is not something that Mike Lawler has any interest in doing. And so we have to kick him out of office. And if I could just, with my last few seconds, take a moment of sort of personal privilege here and ask for a break on the moratorium on the clapping. You thanked all of us for coming tonight and for being here, but I want to thank one of our former candidates who's in the room. Jessica Ryman brought so much to this race. She brought a voice, and she may be wearing a different team jersey. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to take a moment to thank her for all the months that she put into the hard work of running for Congress and brought a lot to it.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who came tonight. So many familiar faces and friends with whom I've stood shoulder to shoulder in the fight to preserve the planet and the people we love. And to the Ossining Dems for convening this important forum. So, as a Rockland County legislator, I have a front row seat and now I know a side seat now that John Sullivan has told me how high the PFAS levels are in the water in his home, to the ways in which our communities and our climate are really suffering as Mike Lawler and Donald Trump's agenda and their big ugly law barrels towards us. We already know that Mike Lawler clawed back clean water funding, clean water, including a project right here in Ossining. Of course, the big ugly law, as we've said multiple times tonight, guts the tax credits that will not only make it harder for us to reach our net zero emission goals by 2040, but are killing jobs. More than 6,000 jobs in New York State and some right here in the Hudson Valley. And of course, there's the cost to human health from PFAS, the government's total failure to address it, as well as the EPA's determination to roll back standards that we know our communities depend on to stay healthy. But we all here know what's at stake. That's why we're here. We have to beat Mike Lawler. You don't have to wonder if I can win a purple seat. I've done it before. I'm the only one on the stage who's already beaten Republicans in tough territory, delivering the first Democratic supermajority in Rockland County history while boosting turnout by 20% right in Mike Lawler's backyard. And you don't have to wonder what I might do in Congress. Donald Trump will still be president, as many have said here tonight. You're gonna need someone who's ready to hit the ground running for our climate
for our planet. I am that person. I am doing the work right now. Whether it is, yes, cracking down on pollution runoff that causes algal blooms, whether it's leading the state in opposing a dirty pipeline under the Hudson River, whether it's facilitating a climate action plan that I ran on for county legislature. These are things I'm doing to stand up to Mike Lawler, oil and gas lobbyist, and his boss, Donald Trump, every damn day. Thank you very much. It's been great to be with you all tonight. Thank you.
Okay, let's give a huge, huge, huge round of applause